Hello, this is an ESL free talk or a conversation starter for kids. And the topic of this ESL free talk is called Animals of the Night. So I'm talking about nocturnal animals. So the way my lessons are structured is that it comes with beautiful images because a picture tells 1,000 words and especially useful for kids. And also, if you notice at the corner here, at the bottom left corner, there are some question prompts. They're designed for the teachers like you to save yourself time so you don't need to come up with your own questions to, kick off the conversation. You can follow these question prompts so that you can start a conversation or break the ice, right, with your students. And the lesson usually starts with a couple of the warm-up slides. So, for example, here is a warm-up slide, right? Here's a picture of a kid sleeping, and then you can ask your student, what time do you go to bed? And this is how you break the ice and get the conversation going. Another example is that, I have a picture of the night and also a picture of the day, and ask your student, do you prefer the night or the day? And why? What do you like to do during the night? And what do you like to do during the day? There's always like questions at the left hand side, corner that you can follow. And of course, if you have your own questions, feel free to bring them up with your student and share your experiences. And then I'm starting. So I talk about nocturnal animals. What are they? And here's the definition. You can get the student to read this, and this is a good way to check their pronunciation, their intonation, and also their reading skills. And I have pictures of these, four animals that that lesson's going to talk about. And then after that, you get right into the individual animals. So, for example, an owl, right? They're nocturnal animals, and what does it mean? So they don't sleep at night. Okay, and owls, like where do they live, right? It shows you, a place where they live, and then here it tells you, owls got really good eyes, right? So they can see very well in the dark, and this is the way they look for food. And then I go on to talk about what they eat, right? So here's a picture of an owl eating a mouse and an owl catching a bird. And then next, I talk about bats. And here, for like lower level ESL students, it's best to repeat the sentence frames so that they get used to the certain sentence frames. So in the previous slide, I said owls are nocturnal animals. So when it comes to bats, I repeat the same thing. Bats are nocturnal animals. And here it is again. Bats don't sleep at night. Whereas before the previous slides, it says owls don't sleep at night. So here's a picture of the bat, right? And you can ask questions like, when do bats sleep, right? Have you ever seen a bat, And what do you see in the picture, right? Ask them to describe the picture. Are are they in the dark or are they in somewhere bright, right? How do bats move? They fly, right? They have these big wings like that. And then afterwards, it talks about where they live. And then here, bats, they hang themselves upside down, right? And ask your students a question, have you ever been inside a cave? And then it talks about, oh, bats have great hearing. So they have good ears, right? This is the way they survive in the dark. And this is how they find food at night. And then here the slide talks about, what they like to eat, right? So bugs, insects, fruits, etc. Ask your student, what's your favorite food? Are you scared of bugs? Okay. And then next, I talk about raccoons. Here again, repeat the question frame. Repeat the sentence frame. And then they have good eyes, right? They can see very well at night, and their eyes actually glow in the dark. And then, where do they live? They live in tree hollows. They live in people's houses. And here, I actually share my personal experience that I had some raccoons living inside my house, like in the roof, and then I had to get somebody over to take them away. And these stories are actually fascinating to these ESL students because some of these students, especially the ones that live in Asia, like China, whereas I live in Canada and in North America, you see raccoons everywhere. You see them in your backyard, you see them on the street, you see them in the park, right? They're no big deal, but to them, it's fascinating. So you can talk about that, and you can get them laughing, right? You can have a great time talking to them about your experiences. And then, again, raccoons have great hearing, they have great ears, and this is how they stay safe in the dark. And then next, what did raccoons like to eat, right? They eat anything. And this is, again, I share my experience how we have to keep the garbage cans tight and locked at night so that the raccoons cannot flip them over because they're actually smart animals and they can really make a mess, right, of your garbage. So this is something interesting to share. And then here's a desert fox, right? They're a nocturnal animal. Again, repeat the sentence frame, and they don't sleep at night. And ask the students to describe this place. Like, what's this place like, right? Is it hot? Is it dry? Do you think that this is a place where you want to live in? Why or why not? Okay. And what does it look like? What does this thing look like, right? The fox looks like a dog to me, and ask the student for their opinion. After that, then, here, they live underground, right? Because it's hot in a desert. So they live under the ground to keep cool, and they come out at night, for food. And then, and I go on to talk about how some nocturnal animals, they're loners, whereas other animals like bats and desert foxes, they like to live in groups. And then lastly, I have some interesting imaginary questions. Always ask your student to, use their creativity, right? Like, this is a question where it says, like, if you were a nocturnal animal, right, what would you be, and get them to give their response, and also ask them why. Why do you want to be this animal, right? I get some very interesting, cool answers from them. Some of them, they want to be a desert fox. Some of them, they want to be a raccoon. They all have their own reasons. So, and then here at the last part is a summary, right? What have you learned? Get the students to give you a summary of what they have learned, right, from this lesson. And this is another good way for them to do more talking. And also, when you're talking to the student, pay attention to their intonation. And I find that a lot of students, they tend to, like, when they ask a question, they have a monotone, like like a flat tone, right? Whereas, like, you should, like, make your tone higher at the end of the sentence. And also, they do get confused with verb tenses, especially with a past tense versus present tense. So I don't try to overcorrect, but I do remind them, and it kind of like give them like gentle reminders and simple explanations. Why, this should be a present tense, or why that should be a past tense. And another thing that they get confused on is third person, first person, second person, right? Like, for example, it go, right? Really, it should be it goes, because it is a third person. So I would just give them gentle reminders. But again, this is not a grammar course. This is more about talking, and it's more about free talk. And it's okay to make mistakes, right? And don't try to overcorrect. But what I do is that when they say something and they try to make a long sentence and they have trouble forming the sentence, I can just say it, or I can just type it in the chat, because I'm using an online application called Woof, and it's like Zoom, right? And I can type it there and have them read it out, and so that they can see word for word what they're supposed to say. Yeah, so come drop by my store. My store is at the Teachers Pay Teachers website. My store is called Speak Up English Talk Resources, and I do sell lessons individually, and also they also come in packages. All right, and my link is in the bio. Bye.